Welcome to What Matters Now, the Times of Israel's weekly podcast drilling into one issue facing Israel and the Jewish world right now. I'm your host, Deputy Editor Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with my friend and film critic, Jordan Hoffman, whom I haven't seen in 8 years, since the time he took me to the New York Jewish spot, Katz's Deli. Jordan, I've missed you so much. So good to see you.
Yes, I guess it has been 8 years since we saw one another. We went to Katz's Deli and obviously the food is marvelous, but I remember you just like brimming with like, this is so New York. This is so New York. A lot of what impressed you, it just kind of flew over my head, was how it was not an exclusively Jewish spot. It was everybody. There were Hispanics, Black people, Muslims, the whole 9 yards. Everybody just really enjoying the pastrami sandwich and the matzo ball soup. And who knew that those were such more enlightened days 8 years ago than today? I don't know what the vibe is like at Katz's now. I haven't been there in a while.
And it was my first knish, which is obviously an important moment as well.
I'm honored to have been there, you know.
So listeners, those of you who regularly listen to our podcast know that it's generally very dour and serious and about the war. But today we're going to do something slightly different. Jordan is here and we're going to discuss all that is Jewish about the upcoming Oscar ceremony and a little bit of anti-Semitism, because we can't go too far away from anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism in Hollywood as well.
But where there are Jews, there is anti-Semitism. They go hand in hand. It's like peanut butter and chocolate.
Peanut butter and jelly as well. So all of this and more after the break. And we're back. Jordan, I, as you know very well, do not go out to movies. And so I've seen none of the movies on your list, but I really enjoyed reading your piece, which will appear on the Times of Israel website shortly, about all that is Jewish about the Oscars. And so what I want to do with you is go through one by one, and you'll tell us a little bit, and then I'll ask you questions about each of these films. So I want to start with the one that is, I sense, perhaps the most Jewy of all. And it's not the one that probably will take the most Oscars of the Jewy films. Okay, so let's start with A Real Pain. Just very quickly, what is this about?
A Real Pain is a masterpiece. It was not nominated for Best Picture, which is a little bit of a shanda, as they say, but it was nominated for Best Screenplay. And it has a fair chance of winning that. And it was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, which it will win. A Real Pain was written and directed and stars Jesse Eisenberg, a nice Jewish boy from New Jersey, who based this a little bit on his actual life. He was very, very close with his great aunt, who was born in Poland and survived and came to this country. And then at some point he visited the village where she came from and also went and visited various concentration camps in Poland. So he was inspired to write the script when he was just playing around on his computer and he saw like a travel package, as I'm sure some of us have seen, to visit, Auschwitz. I mean, people do want to visit Auschwitz. And I know you've been there several times. And when you do that, you still have to book a hotel and find a nice place for dinner. And, it's kind of weird, this sort of Holocaust travel industrial complex there. So he was inspired to write a screenplay in which a character loosely based on himself and a character that he imagined, a cousin who was very opposite him in demeanor, go and visit their grandmother's village. And it's really just 90 minutes of schmooze as they take a tour with a number of other Jews of various age and a convert to Judaism who is a Rwandan who survived the Rwandan genocide and converted to Judaism. And the movie, as far as the plot, it's about a bunch of people walking around sites in Poland and having lunch and looking at beautiful, picturesque places, and then visiting a concentration camp. But it's really about, how the weight of the Holocaust still sits on the shoulders of the grandchildren and even now the great-grandchildren. And it's an interpersonal drama, and it's also, so maybe surprising, maybe not, extremely funny. It is a very, very, very funny, although melancholy story. And it is, in my opinion, one of the finest additions into the Jewish cinema canon in 10 years. It's a masterpiece. The cousin character is played by Kieran Culkin, very talented guy. And he's a very interesting character because he's someone who's very outgoing. He's the life of the party, but he's actually someone who's having deep emotional problems, some of which are based on, the historical, some of which have nothing to do with his Judaism or the Holocaust or his death of his grandmother, and other things do stem from that. And the primary character is the character we see it through is Jesse Eisenberg, who plays someone who, equally has psychological issues, but is keeping it together a little bit better. And the two cousins reconnect on this trip. And I can't say enough good things about it. It is streaming in North America. One can watch it on Hulu if you subscribe to Hulu, which is a good, I like Hulu. They're very good. And it's a quick 90 minutes, and it's beautiful. It's all set to Chopin music. I mean, Chopin is from Poland, obviously. And it's just, I can't say enough nice things about it. It's a really remarkable film.
I do have to say that was one of the crazy things when I did visit Auschwitz. I was there actually just once 10 years ago for the 70th anniversary of the liberation, that the countryside is just stunningly gorgeous. And it is such a stark contrast to, I'm sure in the film they used it as some kind of backdrop to the horror that actually happened.
Well, they don't go to Auschwitz. They go to, I may mispronounce it, Majdanek, I believe. And I believe that is one that is very, very close to the city of, they do go to Lublin in the film, and then they go to another city. And the point that they make in the film is that you can, if you go to the top of a building in this town, you can see the camp. Like, the camp is a 10-minute drive. And it's just like, and the town is so quaint, and there's, outdoor markets, and you can get good pierogies and whatnot. And then there's the camp, it's a little nuts. So, the film is really, and it's not overly, it doesn't shove your face in the horrors of it. It's tough. It's a tough watch, but it's not like a brutal watch, It's one that I think families could watch.
Did you say brutal?
Wow,
did you say brutal?
I did, yeah. Okay. Very good.
Jordan, perfect segue into The Brutalist, of course, another film I have not seen, but heard a lot about and read a lot about. And I want you to talk about the film itself, of course, which also has a Holocaust tie and a tie to Israel even. But then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question that is not in your piece. So wait for that. Oh,
okay. Good. I'm looking forward to that. Well, it's funny. The Brutalist and A Real Pain are a yin and yang this year because both of these movies are about the consequences of the Holocaust. The Brutalist is set right after the war. The opening shot is an immigrant played by Adrian Brody emerging from the bowels of a ship in New York Harbor, and he comes to America and he sees the Statue of Liberty, of course, from his angle, because he's turning his head. The Statue of Liberty is upside down, man, and it's a great image, and that's the image on the poster. But the yin and yang of it is A Real Pain is a light, Chopin sonata, 90 minutes precisely. The Brutalist is like a 3.5 hour slab of concrete. It's a massive rhinoceros of a film. And by and large, it earns it. It's very, very good. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but it's a pretty good effort. It's a very, very, very good movie. It's about big, weighty themes. Not everything gets tied up at the end. It's one of those movies where the person who wrote and directed it, co-wrote it, I should say, was like, we're going to make a movie about everything. We're going to stuff everything into this thing, and it's going to be huge. And by and large, it succeeds. The basic premise is Adrian Brody survived the camps. He and his wife get separated, and she kind of ends up behind the Iron Curtain in Hungary. He's originally from Hungary. And he comes to America, and he's a genius architect in the Brutalist style. He's trained at the Bauhaus and everything. And he's very, he won't, what's the word called when you don't, when you do it your way or the highway, when you're, he won't compromise, uncompromising. So he starts finding work, and when it's like, no, but you have to make some changes, he's like, I make no changes. Goodbye. He storms off, and you kind of respect that. Over time, he winds up finding a patron, and the patron is played by this like uber goy It's Guy Pearce, and the character's name is like Herman van Buren Meersten, something extremely Dutch, whatever. And he takes him under his wing because he recognizes that he's a genius. But at first you think, oh my God, this is an angel. He's giving me money. He's giving me work. But really, he's manipulating him. And he is deeply anti-Semitic, this guy. He's got a lot of other problems too. And then that's kind of it in terms of the story. It's about this eventual clash between an artist who has a vision and this guy who wants to control him, representing capitalism, representing, conformity, whatever you want. And where will they meet? As a side note to all this, there is Israel, which is held out as it would have been for any immigrant to America, any Jewish person in the world in the late 40s, 50s, and maybe even into the very early 60s as sort of an option. Do we make Aliyah? Do we go to Israel? And at first, our lead character is like, no, the American dream, I will make it work here. And over time, he starts to rethink that. And there are other characters in the film who eventually emigrate, loved ones. There's a niece character. And this is kind of interesting because anything involving Israel makes people crazy. And the movie shows it as I think it would have been. It's not necessarily pro-Israel, nor is it, Israel, but that would displace the Palestinians who live there. Oh, we can't move there. Or, there's none of that. It's just like kind of how people talked back then. And this has driven a lot of very young people crazy because the movie is very hip. It's it's sort of a slightly avant-garde, the way it's shot. The director, who is not Jewish, but the director is someone who has a lot of cred. And it's not a studio film. It was independently financed. And the fact that it is not blatantly anti-Zionist has made some people look for either condemn it for that because no character says, but don't you know this is bad? And or have projected onto the film, which has a lot of ambiguity, signs. Secretly, that's an anti-Zionist statement that character made if you really read it closely. And I've read some of those essays. I linked to them in the article that I've written for TOI. And you can read those articles and go, maybe, I don't know. I honestly think that the filmmaker just wanted to make a film that was representative of what the Jewish experience was like for somebody who comes to America and is living in, it's now 1955 and things are not going the way he wanted. And he's thinking about Israel as an option. It's not the main point of the film, but it's in there, and there's been a lot of discussion about it online.
So you said that the antagonist, I don't know what he is, the patron at least, that is a very anti-Semitic guy.
Yes.
And he's played by Guy Pearce. Now, Jordan, before we talked, I did a little Googling on you, and I noticed that you interviewed Guy Pearce.
Yes.
And one of the themes of your piece in what rag was that in?
It was in Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair.
Oh, yeah, a little thing.
Yeah.
In any case, one of the themes was his really utter support for the Palestinian cause during the war.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about this.
Oh, Guy Pearce and I are very close friends. Guy Pearce is an extremely talented actor who, in my opinion, is someone who, there are people who vie for peace and wish that there would be harmony in the Middle East. And of course, I am one of them. Then there are some people who really wish for the abolishment of the Jewish state and probably have a problem with Jews. I do not know what is inside of Guy Pearce's heart, but he does give every indication of being someone who is in that latter group. Specifically, and it's funny, the character, I mean, listen, he's extremely talented. And I just saw a new movie he's in called The Shrouds, which is not very good, directed by David Cronenberg, who is Jewish, and Guy Pearce plays a Jew in it, and he's great. So, I mean, the guy's talented. There are plenty, go look at history, there's plenty of talented anti-Semites out there. I'm not saying Guy Pearce is an anti-Semite, but what I will say is when I interviewed him, and this is a little behind the scenes, I met with him for about an hour. We're in a room together in New York, extremely talented, handsome fella. He's made some great movies over the years. And he's got a weird track record. He was, if you read the article in Vanity Fair, you'll learn that he was sort of blacklisted by Warner Brothers, one of the main studios. There was one of the heads of production at Warner Brothers just didn't like Guy Pearce. I don't know why, but, something happened there. In our discussion, he was wearing a Free Palestine wristband, and he had his phone on the table, which had a big sticker of the Dome of the Rock. It said Free Palestine. And listen, hey, this is America. You're allowed to say what you want. He's from New Zealand, but God bless, So I said to him, look, you're a Hollywood actor. You're in a movie right now that's in an Oscar push. You've got the Free Palestine all over the place. It's on your social media. Have you been given any feedback from your managers, your agents, the studios to say, hey, Guy, maybe tone it down, wait till the movie's out of the public eye? And, has there been any pushback? Which I think is a totally fair question. And he thought for a minute, and he said, yes, there has been some pushback, but I choose to speak what I believe, and I'm like, okay, yes, that's cool. And then he continued, and the direct quote I can't give you, but it is in the piece. He said, there have been some people that have said to me, you need to be careful because you know what Hollywood is made of, or who's in charge of Hollywood. And I took him at that. And I will let you know that everyone I showed that quote to, Jews and Gentiles alike, said, holy shit, Guy Pearce just said the Jews run Hollywood, didn't he? And I said, I'm just quoting what he said. So my editor at Vanity Fair, and we took it to pretty much the top, everybody there, and said, we should offer Guy Pearce an opportunity to clarify this a little bit, see if he has anything to say. We contacted his people, and they thought about it, and they said, no, we're just gonna we have nothing to say. We're not gonna we can't retract it. He said what he said. And we have nothing more to say. All right. And then the piece is about to go. And I said, oh, man, I don't know. I mean, I feel like this is going to blow up a little bit. It doesn't really make Guy Pearce look that great. Let me, so let's give him a second chance. And I was like, and then I'm saying, why am I fighting for Guy Pearce here? Why does he have a hold of me? He is very handsome. And I sat in a room with him for an hour. So we contacted Guy Pearce's people again. We spoke to their manager, and they were in London, and Guy Pearce lives in the Netherlands. There was a lot of phone calls and whatnot. And then Guy Pearce said, no, we have nothing more to add. And that's that. So the quote went as is. And what's funny is not that many people noticed the quote, because elsewhere in that interview, he made this revelation about how he had been blacklisted at Warner Brothers. And it was heavily implied that the director, Christopher Nolan, wanted to hire him for a part in the Batman movie, the part that ultimately Liam Neeson played. And people saw that, and that became a really big story somehow. International news. Guy Pearce was going to be the Liam Neeson character until some schmuck at Warner Brothers said, no, Guy Pearce. And that became a really big story. And I was like, oh, that's interesting that my little interview is now being read around the world, and I'm happy. But you kind of picked up on the wrong quote there. That's not the guy lost the job because he's not in the Batman movie. Big deal. Anyway, listen, we did offer him an opportunity to clarify. Maybe I can't know what was going on in his head. Maybe he said, oh, crap, I shouldn't have said that. But if I walk it back, it makes it look worse. I'm just going to bite it and let it live and hope nothing happens. He is, if you look at other interviews with Guy Pearce, he is someone who does shoot from the hip a lot. He says a lot of, he doesn't work in Hollywood that much. He does a lot of independent films. Abundantly talented guy. But what he said was, and I'm paraphrasing, you can look at it, is he basically said, be careful about your support of Palestine because you know who runs Hollywood. That's not the exact quote. You know what Hollywood is made of. That was the phrase. That was the exact quote. Which is a little... I wouldn't say that, or I wouldn't say that to a reporter. I certainly wouldn't say that if I wasn't Jewish to a reporter without like a joke. I mean, I feel like you and I could somebody say, oh, yeah, the Jews run Hollywood. The Jews created Hollywood. That's true. Let's put that on. Hollywood was created by Jews who couldn't get work elsewhere. It was a déclassé industry. It was like, we're schmata salesmen, or we can try this new things, moving pictures. Okay. 90% of all the movie studios were created by Jews who were using their smarts to create a new wonderful thing. And today, if you go to Hollywood, Jewish people do over-index in that field. There are more, it's not like, it's not, when you go to the auto industry, it's not as many Jews in the auto industry as there are in Hollywood. That's just because it's for whatever reason. If you go get your nails done in New York City, it's mostly Koreans that run the stores. I mean, it's just a thing. But it's one thing to celebrate the history of Jews creating Hollywood, and another thing to say, you know who runs the show if you do this. Furthermore, I do not believe that there's any sort of blacklisting going on now if you support Palestine. I feel like you're in more trouble if you come out in support of Israel right now, because that will...
Which we're going to talk about in terms of another movie.
Yes.
After the break. Okay, and we're back. Now, I would like to talk with you about the movie that seems so incredibly pro-Israeli on the face of it, just on the face of the topic of it, and sparked a huge, huge outcry by, surprisingly to me, people who work in movie theaters who didn't want to be indoctrinated. So we're talking about the movie September 5th,
yes,
which captures the moment that I think it's the ABC Sports Desk is covering the massacre of Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics in 1972. So what you just mentioned before we went to break about the outcry if you are pro-Israel is so exemplified to me in this particular situation, because obviously, as you mentioned in our piece, it could have been X character. It could have been any kind of minority, any kind of nationality. The movie isn't about that. It's about a scrappy news team using everything they have to cover this massacre, a very high drama event. And it's just astounding to me that this is the reflection of our times when it comes to the reality on the ground.
Yeah. So let me back it up a little bit. September 5 is a very, very, very good movie. And if it had come out 10 years ago, it would be nominated for Best Picture. Right now, it's nominated for Best Screenplay, and that's it. It is not pro-Israel, and it's not about the massacre. It's about the news team. In a way, it could be about how you cover a hurricane. It's a procedural about how a news team operates. But it is important because this was the first live terrorism event, and it's set in 1972. So you're seeing, now everything is digital. You and I are communicating over this marvelous platform here. Back then, you had to run and shoot film and develop film in a record time. You had to put there's a great sequence in September 5 about how they put the names under somebody. Like, they show how it's done back then with film and with physical letters and all this cool stuff. That's what the movie's about. But it is about the Munich massacre in 72 and about, it was a Palestinian terrorist group, Black September, I think they're called, or something like that. The film is really just about the procedural, and but it is set against this sort of terrorist act, and it is the first time this was done on live television, and millions of people were watching it. They say at the end, more people watched this coverage of the news team at the Munich Olympics than Neil Armstrong on the moon. So that's remarkable. I mean, the movie does have Jewish characters in it, and so obviously they feel very connected to what's happening. And then there are Germans in the film that are, have some queasy feeling. There's one character, she's German, and, a German in 1972 has all kinds of feelings about these sort of things. And then there are characters who are, I think, North African. And like when they use the word terrorism, one guy's like, oh, should we use that word? And there's like the moment, the movie even is just like, look, clearly not all Arabs are terrorists. We don't think that, but we want to be, so the movie is not propaganda in any way. If anything, it's just propaganda for journalists, for good journalism.
We're a dying breed, Jordan, right?
Right. So the movie was produced. It was not produced in the U.S. I mean, it has American actors in it, but it was a German production. It was then bought at it debuted at the Venice Film Festival. It was bought by Paramount and given a release, in North America, but it was a muted release. And although this does not hold up in court. I can only give you my beliefs. The timing on this was just like nobody wanted to come out and say, "Oh, you have to see this movie that is even remotely pro-Israel." It just wouldn't land right now. It was just too difficult. And it wasn't, even critics, and I do link to a few in the piece. There's some critics they say, "Oh, the movie's good, but why would they release it now?" Of course, it was in production before the Hamas attack. This is not, people would see it in the theater like, "Oh, this is just propaganda about the Hamas war." It's like, no, the movies take a very long time to make. It's not like that.
But Jordan, why do you think that they released it now? Because as you said, they take a long time. They could have held it for another year, don't you think?
Yes, but I mean, yes, I suppose you're right. But they want it out in the world because they want to do their next project. A director like this, it's a good film, and anybody who watches it will like it. He'll get work off of it. You got to remember, everybody that works in movies is a freelancer. Even if they're famous, even if they make a lot of money, they're still, once the project's done, they got to get to their next thing. So they don't want it lingering on the shelf for too long. That includes the actors and everybody. Now, I did allude to something in my piece, which was indicative of sort of a tempest in a teapot. I don't want to make it seem as if there were mass demonstrations against this movie. I think by and large, most people just ignored it, which is a shame because it's very good. But in Brooklyn, which is another world, I mean, Brooklyn is not representative of planet Earth in any way. It's a very small community of extreme people. There is a movie theater chain, which is very hip, called the Alamo Drafthouse, and they hire a lot of young, fashionable people. And there was an online petition to say we don't want this movie showing because it's Zionist propaganda, which just clearly shows they didn't watch it. And even if it were, I mean, your job is to sell popcorn. Your job is not, just do your job or shut up, in my opinion. But the thing is, 1,000 people signed this protest. Now, to sign something, half of them weren't even like names. It was initials. I mean, it's just like people sitting on their couch can do, you could sign 25 petitions in a half hour if you do it right, so, I mean, it's not like there were mass protests, but the fact that somebody bothered to set this up in general, and the way it's written, and it's some lunatic who wrote the initial thing, was not just we hate this movie. They're like, this movie misrepresents the action, and they called the killing. They killed wrestlers, right? They killed Israeli wrestlers, and they all blew up in a helicopter. They called it Operation whatever. It has a name that the Palestinian organization called it. It misrepresented Operation Grand Slam or whatever. As not the righteous rebellion of people who have been blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, all right, time out. Look, I mean, give me a break. It's like, sure, yes, I concur. There can be a better way for the Israelis and Palestinians to live with one another. I concur that there are routes one can take, but when you start saying, it misrepresents the way they shot the wrestlers, what they should have used a nicer bullet. I mean, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, this is insanity. So that is indicative of kind of a grander theme of, what's happening in New York and in America right now with anything to do with Israel is you're going to receive not just backlash, just like ludicrous backlash. Now, to what extent that backlash will actually affect the bottom line still remains to be seen. There's actually an interesting thing coming up in a few months, which I wanted to bring up because I know we wanted to talk about just sort of like the state of affairs in Hollywood. As you know, and I wrote about for TUI, there was a recent Captain America movie which was very bad, and it bombed. It bombed internationally. And one of the problems, although not the primary problem, was that it did dare to have an Israeli character. And I've written about this in the TOI has been covering it for a very long time. The actress Shira Haas is in the film, and the minute that she was cast, a lot of people online were screaming and yelling, "How dare you cast an Israeli?" And she plays a surveillance expert and blah, blah, blah. And the character is originally based on someone from the comics who is called a superhero named Sabra, which is a little silly. They've changed it now. She's just someone who works for Harrison Ford, who's the president of the U.S. And there were demonstrations about that too. Not mass demonstrations, but enough people. And if you went online on social media, the very, very, very loud minority would say, "Hey, I just bought tickets to see Captain America." All these people would flame you and say, "How dare you go see Zionist propaganda?" Now, that's not it seems like a lot of people because people are tweeting at you and going on your Facebook page, but it's really not. It's a very small percentage, but nevertheless, it's a pain. It's annoying. They're like gnats, and it's representative of something that Hollywood doesn't want to deal with. Now, what I'm getting to is that in a couple of months, there's going to be a new Snow White movie coming out. Happens to look terrible, but that's fine.
A new Snow White movie, and I'm just like, how did you get to this?
I'm getting to
anti-Semitism.
No. Here we go. Awesome. This is a great canary. We're gonna in a couple months. This is going to be a very important story. The Snow White movie stars our friend Gal Gadot. She plays the evil queen.
Okay.
Gal Gadot is to you and I just an actress. She's very pretty. She's not the world's greatest actress, but she's fine, and she's been in some hit movies. But to the radicalized online left who waste a lot of time on the internet, she is the personification of evil. She's got blood dripping out of her mouth because all she does is kill babies in their minds. Why? Because she served in the IDF for 10 minutes. This movie could, on paper, it should be a hit, right? Wicked came out, Barbie came out. Those are two movies that did phenomenally well and are kind of marketed to the same demographic. Family films based on an intellectual property everybody's heard of, geared toward girls, but for everybody. And if Snow White is a disaster, it may be for several reasons, but one of the compounding reasons will be like, oh, the online left didn't like Gal Gadot. Also, it's a movie like this, a big budget, international release. It's not just North America. It's Europe, it's France, it's Spain, it's all the countries that love us, the Netherlands, and Turkey, and other places, and even the Arab world. So I think what you're going to see with the Snow White film is if it underperforms significantly, I think that's the Hollywood studios are going to be like, look, we really need to ease up on anything remotely Israel. You're not really seeing anything now. I mean, smaller films will touch on these topics or cast Israeli performers, but something with a big budget, it's just money. There's a lot at stake.
Do you think that this is maybe part of the reason why the Bob Dylan flick, A Complete Unknown, really underplayed his Jewish background?
Yeah.
You said in your piece that only one tiny little scene alluded to the fact that he was once called Robert Zimmerman, my mother's maiden name, by the way.
No, I'm going to say to that, no, but that's a good call. No, because that movie is all about the mercurial and unknowable nature of Bob Dylan. It's a recurring theme in the film, how he doesn't talk about anything from his past, that he is a complete unknown. He's a complete self-made man. So I'm not going to say the lack of there is a weird, not weird. There is a notable lack of Jewishness in the film, but I don't think that is a business decision. I think that was an artistic decision because there are plenty of Jews in Bob Dylan's world, but they don't speak in Yiddish or anything. I mean, a lot of the people who made those great records in the mid '60s, Mike Bloomfield, Al Cooper, some of his manager, Albert Grossman, other people in the folk revivalism scene, big producers, they were all Jewish. And that whole folk revivalism scene of the mid 1960s, over-indexed for Jewish people and personalities. But it's not in the film, but I see what you're saying, but that's not the case in that particular. A Complete Unknown, and of course, A Complete Unknown stars Timothée Chalamet, who is a half. I believe his mother's Jewish. I don't think his father is. And he was raised in New York City. He's a very Jewish kid, and he's marvelous in the film as the young Bob Dylan. It's a very, very good movie. for people who are wondering, because, a lot of times those musical biopics can be kind of lousy. I mean, the musics are good. Like there was the one, Freddie Mercury won Bohemian Rhapsody, and it even won the lead actor who won the Oscar. And the music's great. Queen, the music of Queen, you see him at Wembley Stadium singing all these powerful songs, We Are the Champions. But the movie itself is kind of not so hot.
Jordan, that is one of the rare films that I actually did see. And maybe because I see so few films, I thought it was fantastic. We all had a great time.
It's a good time.
Moving, yeah.
This one's even better. When you see A Complete Unknown, you're gonna go, wow, I thought Bohemian Rhapsody was good. A Complete Unknown is really good. It's a great film. And the woman who plays Joan Baez, who may win the Best Supporting Actress award, and she deserves it. She's I love her. So,
and maybe I will see it, because I have to tell you, just last weekend I saw 7 Years in Tibet, so there's always a chance that one day I'll catch the film.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jordan, let's close out with a potential winner of, what is it, Best Documentary, which is a very tricky piece to wrap my head around. And it's an interesting coexistence project in a way, from what I read.
Well, no, I don't think it's a coexistence project. It's a From the River to the Sea project, I think.
But it's half Jewish and half Palestinian, correct?
Yeah, yes. So the film is called No Other Land. And it was directed by a collective of 4 people, 2 of whom are Jewish Israelis, 2 of whom are Palestinians living in the West Bank. And it is about the tourists that these people in the West Bank deal with on a daily basis, a topic of which I am very sympathetic toward. I don't like people getting pushed around by tanks and the IDF. But the movie is a propaganda piece, and that's fair. I mean, that it is what it is. I mean, there are other documentaries this year. There's a Ukrainian film that's very good called Porcelain War, which is also a propaganda piece. It's an anti-Russian film, a pro-Ukrainian film. I mean, that's just, to call something propaganda is not a pejorative in my opinion. But the movie has taken on, it will probably win the Best Documentary Award, because right now there is, even though Hollywood is allegedly, run by Jews, it's how do I get into this succinctly? The movie has a great meta-narrative in that a year ago, it won the Best Documentary Prize at the Berlin Film Festival. And even back then, it was controversial because the two representative directors gave a speech. This is so stupid. And some minister in the German cabinet applauded, and they showed, and on camera, she applauded the 2 directors who made a very meaningful film about the troubles in the West Bank, a film that I admire. It's a good film. And she applauded, and then people said, oh, you were applauding a Palestinian, right? Because Germany can be a little hardcore. And she's like, no, I was only applauding the Israeli director and not applauding the Palestinian director. What a dumb thing to say, It's called walk back. Maybe that's why Guy Pearce didn't walk back what he said to me. You look stupider when you walk something back. You said it, just deal with it. Like all the inflammatory things I've said on this podcast so far, when people watch this and confront me for being not in lockstep with Brooklyn. So the movie then came out at Berlin, and it had that little mini controversy, which I'm sure TOI covered because it was ridiculous. Then the movie played well at other festivals, but the movie did not receive an offer for distribution from a major North American film distributor.
Well, you know why, because who runs Hollywood?
Right. Guy Pearce knows why. Well, God knows, I was not in the meetings of all these companies to know what their decision was. But, one company was like, they probably said, let him do it. And the other one said, let him do it. And then nobody did it. There were offers on the table from very small companies, and that has been documented. And I linked to that in my piece. So there has been a narrative of like, nobody would touch it in the US. That's not exactly true. Smaller companies would touch it. But the producers of this film said, no, we don't want to go with pipsqueak distributors. We want one of the real guys, which I could understand. So then the story became, it's the movie too hot to touch. And everybody wrote articles about it, several articles in the New York Times, and it became a cause célèbre. And then the movie took on very wisely, and I have to really applaud the publicity company and that worked on this film. In fact, I'm friendly with these people. The woman who was kind of marshaled all this, she's great at what she does. It became sort of like a censorship thing. If you don't go see No Other Land, you're letting the man dictate what you're allowed to see, which I actually think is very smart of them, and I agree with. I think we should see all the films. I think we should see the propaganda films on the left and right and figure it out for ourselves what we believe. I'm old school that way. So the movie then was self-released, which can be done. It's difficult, it's complex, it involves a lot of work. But the movie was then distributed by the producers themselves and by this company, and it played at a lot of independent theaters across the country. And at the end of the day, and I can't prove this in court, but I believe this to be true, more people saw this movie because it wasn't released than had a company just said, oh yeah, we'll release No Other Land, an important movie about the West Bank that should be seen. It was sort of the Streisand effect, when you say, no, don't look at me, more people look at you. And I got to applaud this company for the way they played this. And it has won a lot of awards prior to this, and it'll probably win at the Oscars. Probably. You never know. And when it wins at the Oscars, I'm sure they will say some inflammatory things on the stage, and that'll be a news cycle. Especially now, they can say inflammatory things about Donald Trump, which will go down easy because that's it's a lot easier when they yell at Trump than when they just yell at Israel in general. So that's in sort of the media sphere.
Jordan,
yeah.
I'm going to let you go because we've been going on for a long time, a lot longer than most of our What Matters Now episodes. So listeners, whoever lasted this long, thanks so much for staying with us. And the Oscars are on Sunday night in the U.S. time. So we'll know by Monday morning whether anything you said was true.
Yeah, no, I could be completely wrong. All of my predictions could be wrong, but I will say that some of these movies are good. Again, I don't want to knock the film No Other Land. When I say it's propaganda, I don't mean that as a bad way. I mean, if you're someone who, even if you're very, very, very right-wing Israeli, I think it is important to, there are real people living in the West Bank, and you gotta. There's never going to be peace unless you can look at these people. It would be nice for them to look at us too, but we can't force them to do anything. But it's a good film, and it'll probably win. And before anyone condemns it from either side, you should at least watch it.
Jordan, so much thanks for seeing you again. It's been really a pleasure. I can't wait to see you in the flesh at Katz's Deli again. Hopefully not in another 8 years. No. That's terrible. And thank you so much for joining me today.
You got it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's What Matters Now. Please check out another installment next week. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next week, shalom.